Recording in progress.
Let's go, Noel.
What?
Let's go.
Wow, Kim, on the job.
Good shit to do.
It is.
Stephanie, I gotta say, we're wearing turtlenecks and socks and you're.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
that's
did hear
it.
I did hear it was horrible there today. Yes, rain, wind.
Bad.
It's like a monsoon.
Yeah,
And it was horrible where you are too, I'm sure.
horrid.
I can't complain.
Yeah,
Anyway, all right. We gotta get going. Kim's got things to do.
yes.
So, all right, thanks for joining, everyone. I think I wanted really tonight's to be more of a brainstorming session, but I have a few things on my list. So I'm just gonna start kind of at the top of the agenda and sort of work my way down if that works for everyone. All right. So the first thing I had was, I was just gonna go over, like, you know that there are 4 land use articles at the upcoming town meeting, which is May 3rd at 6 o'clock. Hopefully everybody's going to be there. I don't know if you really want me to go over them. I can pull them up, but I think we've talked about them enough. But I just wanted to remind everybody it's non-conforming, an issue with non-conforming lots that we're clarifying. We're adding provisions to the ordinance to help with some shoreline zoning standards that we need to do. Accessory dwelling unit clarity and zone change request. So those are really the 4 things. Pretty simple clarity questions. Any questions on town meeting?
Can I ask you a question, Noel?
Yes.
The accessory residential stuff, are you staying on top of that with the legislation by any chance?
Yeah, I was. I looked over that stuff that you sent me. I actually went to a housing session. There was like Grow Smart Maine did a housing thing. A couple of weeks ago. It was like an online thing. They did talk about it at that meeting too. I haven't stayed on top of it enough to know whether or not it's like gotten passed yet. I think it has quite a bit of momentum.
I think it was at Janet Mills' desk to be signed.
Yeah. And I have to look, Kim, I have to do some research to see if we need to add something about that to the next year's.
Yeah, that's why I was asking about it.
Yep. That's
Okay, thanks.
That's on my list. All right, so the next one I had on the list was sort of more of a brainstorming for this coming year workload. I think I'd like to jump back on the subdivision ordinance. I know we've got a pretty decent draft, but we need to kind of jump back into that. And I have to read it over again, make some edits and try to simplify it a little bit. But I do think that's going to be one thing coming down for everybody to look at. It's time. So not that, and we can work around what you have in place if applicants are willing to kind of look at, what the statute actually requires for subdivision ordinances and those kinds of things. But we should have a better one. The other one would be, I know the Board of Selectmen are still really interested in something to do with short-term rentals. So I'm going to put a pin in that one and we can talk about it in a little bit. The other one I have is, I just continue to think that as Kim starts to interpret things, and we always do this every year, but as we go, we're going to be adding changes or tweaks to the land use ordinance that we can't anticipate right now. We do have one where I know, Kim, you might want to provide a little more detail on this, but this was the 6B11, some clarity on the number 3 provision that allows for, an additional 2-family dwelling unit on a lot, which is currently in place, but I think it does get a little confusing for people. So there's some clarity we need to add there. Was that the main point, Kim?
Yeah, the way it's written, it's just hard to see whether you have to meet the dimensional requirements ×2 to have a 2-family, or because of the word additional, meaning to me means another one, more than one. And so
Right.
that's why I need clarification on that.
Yeah. The way that I think we've been interpreting it, or at least the way I understand it, is you are allowed an additional 2-family dwelling unit on a lot, according to the ordinance. So we just want to.
Without having to meet the dimensional requirements ×2 because of the
Correct.
word additional.
Yep.
Either 1 family additional one family or two family. So that kind of,
Yep,
and there's some questions on that, and I've interpreted it that way. I mean, they're not a big to-do to have, two families aren't, you know, I don't issue a lot of those permits, but I am getting questions on it. And I think if it's clearer in the ordinance, then it's more understandable. It's not like gray, like making me think, you know. it's
Correct.
not Make me think.
yeah. That also, as another pin that we can put in that discussion, as we're having that discussion, I think it would be really interesting to explore. And I had some questions from, I actually had a meeting with a resident over in Seal Harbor about a month ago. And they're, interesting questions about, hey, I have this giant structure, but I'm only allowed to put, one apartment building in it or something like that. So I wonder, as part of this kind of, we could segue from the clarity into a discussion about, some dimensional requirements and additional density within a building that's already on the lot, and what provisions we might think about in certain areas that might allow additional density to help with some of this housing challenges that are being faced, but aren't so tied to lot size, I guess is the only way I can describe it. But if you have a big building that fits dimensionally on the lot, should we be thinking about ways to capitalize on that in certain areas? I understand that there's other things to consider, like parking and septic and all that good stuff, but I think it would be worth having that discussion, just to sort of like throw all the tools in the toolbox, if you will, in terms of how we deal with some of this housing affordability questions that are going to be coming up, soon, and probably as part of any comprehensive plan update. It's probably already in your comprehensive plan. So I'll put that pin out there because I've been thinking about that a little bit. And then, the last one I had, Kim, was housing, just to monitor that housing legislative changes to housing, which may or may not have implications on the way you already do stuff in Mount Desert. And what the legislature is doing is trying to create a little more, it seems to me it's a little more flexibility for towns to be able to require things like accessory dwelling units or allow things like accessory dwelling units and whatnot, which currently they don't do. And when I was at the housing conference or the housing workshop that I was talking to you about and just listening in, I think, kind of one of the examples is something that you guys, the town of Mount Desert already does. So we already allow a second dwelling unit on a lot if it's a smaller size. So
Do you
you're
know
already,
if that will affect the shoreline zone too?
I don't know if it'll affect the shoreline zone. That would be great.
Yeah, I know.
And I also, again, these are other kind of conversations that we should be having, but how do we prioritize affordability if we can, or if you want to, like you could have a lot of freedom in terms of density, but not have any benefit from that if you don't start to think about the rules. And the benefit being, trying to achieve the goal that I think, the whole point of accessory dwelling units, at least from the legislative perspective, at least the conversations that I've understood, is because there's such an there's a crisis of affordability in Maine for housing.
Mhm.
And so what are the tools that you can use to help achieve that? Like I said, we've already got a tool in Mount Desert in that, accessory dwelling unit provision. We could just continue to kind of look at that and see what happens. Or also, taking a look at, like I said, the density requirements in some of these bigger structures that already have the footprint that's allowed, but you just can't utilize it for the density of housing that may or may not be appropriate for certain areas. So it's kind of interesting. Any other things that we should add to the list? That we skipped over that I'm forgetting?
Perennial Zonesville Otter Creek.
I've got that next, so we don't need to talk about that, but I do have a sort of a strategy working. I'm starting to implement for that. So
Okay.
definitely going to do some village planning. Well, I should say definitely. I always say that, but we are planning to do some village planning. Well, I'm sure that some things will pop up, but as we get into it, a couple of the other things that we need to start talking about are the village, I think village planning. So focusing in on villages outside of the village of Northeast Harbor. And what I've started to do, and I'll share probably at the next meeting, thinking let's like get some meeting dates on the calendar so that we can actually make some progress on that. We've started some mapping to kind of help set the stage for those conversations for both. We have Soamesville, obviously, Otter Creek is a big one, and then we might want to think about Seal Harbor as a topic, not to poke the bear over in Seal Harbor too much, but it's kind of an interesting area right now. So I would add that to the list. And then Jerry, just when we start to get to the Soamesville conversation, I just probably check in with you because I just want to refresh my memory. Can you refresh my memory now, actually? Like, what was the primary driver between you for you guys coming?
Just sort of figuring out a way to have some sort of actual ability to have a retail anything on the main street of Soamesville.
Commercial,
Yeah, commercial.
yeah.
Because there's already enough weekly rentals on the street. But there is interest in people that might someday want to not reopen Higgins, but the Higgins.
Yep. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, there's I don't know that there's a lot of space available, but it was a question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a challenging one in Soamesville because some of the things that you have in retail in an area that doesn't have a lot of like parking and, lighting would be a big issue. How do you create that environment while still maintaining that kind of historic architectural style that is now.
Yeah, what you could do a commercial building that didn't have a lot of excessive lighting.
No, and we just have to put that into sort of something that the planning board can review and.
Yeah, because One Stop has more than enough lighting.
Yeah, it just reflects all the way down the street.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you might consider maybe doing some historic preservation or historic district also.
Yeah.
And have architectural type of designs. For requirements for somebody that wants to either convert a house into a business or whatever, if you want to make it look like it's a house or.
Yep.
Because that's, I guess, this was before my time, hence the reason all buildings are like white with a black shutter, is there must have been some regulation in place at some point, long time ago. And I know from like the Soamesville fire station, I believe it is, up to just before I think the Soamesville One Stop, that's in a historic district. According to the Maine Historic Preservation, I have the map of the area that's designated the historic, so they might have something to say about it too at the Maine Historic Preservation at the state of Maine.
Yeah. I'm sure they
Are
will.
are there any houses that are registered in Soamesville? Do you know?
I haven't come across any that have. And then the Maine Historic Preservation doesn't get typically involved with somebody's private residence, although there is like an architectural manual that they always refer me to tell people when somebody wants to renovate their building, they want to keep that look of, this shingles or asphalt, because I had somebody that wanted to go to metal roof and they said, no, they shouldn't do that. And so, and as long as the state and the federal aren't doing any funding for any of this renovations that people are doing to their homes, then they wouldn't get involved.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about the whole historic district and, just sort of walk the balance between being overly restrictive, because I think that's the fear when you get into some historic, preservation standards, but also on the flip side of that, how can we make sure that we're setting up, homeowners for success if they actually do want to apply for like historic tax credits during renovation and things like that. Are we doing the right things on that behalf. I think, Kim, you made a suggestion a week or so ago to somebody that I thought was really interesting about, applying for, if you're doing a renovation project, why not look into the historic tax credits for that? And I don't know the answer to this question, but is it really kind of interesting to think about if there's some code things in place that would help facilitate a successful approach to that, as opposed to oftentimes like the Maine historic preservation stuff people tend to feel more restricted by that, as opposed to the opposite of feeling more free to try something if they really want to do a renovation project. But then on the flip side of that is also like having some design and architectural standards in place would help guide, if a homeowner is making an evaluation between the expense of a renovation project versus just starting from scratch, you still want to guide them toward the architectural feel that is Soamesville, and that's where the regulations come in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that would be really interesting, just to add to the conversation, how do people in Soamesville feel about it, and then go from there. Okay. I've already mentioned the density, standard versus, building dimensions versus density of development within those buildings, kind of that conversation I had in Soamesville, which I thought, to add to the mix, wider than just specific to Soamesville, but I think it's a good, interesting conversation. I don't know the regulatory framework for it, and whether or not anybody's even interested in the idea of looking into it, but I thought it was something worth checking out. And then for short-term rentals, working on a few different things for short-term rentals right now, just to kind of kick the can down the road. And one of them is the idea that we want to do a survey. So we might try to do two different things. One is just sort of frame out a survey that we can send to people to try to get information on whether or not they are, they have a short-term rental or not. And that's a voluntary thing and may not be overly, the response rate might not be great because people might not want to know about it. And then because we keep getting asked the question, we are going to come up with a framework for kind of the next step in the regulatory process for some sort of short-term rental registration perhaps. And then what I would like to do is as part of that conversation is sort of open the conversation to, okay, so we're going to do the registration. What happens? Is there a benefit that the town can get from that registration? Should we be creating a fund that can help assist with some affordability issues? Can the short-term rental help the problem that it's supposedly creating versus just, bringing money into the town, for example. So I don't have a good framework for that yet, but that's on the list.
No, I recently went to the Economic Development Committee meeting, and it seems that they did a housing stock inventory. So I don't know if that would help with this or if it would be overwhelming.
It would. I probably already have it. I don't know how they did it, but we already did one. I've already done it for like a comp plan chapter.
Okay.
But it'll be interesting if you have the report. I'd love to get a copy.
I don't have the report. It's with the Economic Development Committee.
Yeah.
People.
We could ask Kathy or somebody to get a copy of it. That would be great. I'm happy to try. But I mainly for like some of these things that we're doing, I think it's the one really important thing that we can do between all the committees that are working on very similar issues is have a consistent set of data so that we can all agree that this is the framework we're starting from. That would be helpful. Yeah, but I'm sure I have all that already.
It wouldn't hurt for all those committees to actually get together sometime and.
Yeah, we can try to facilitate that, Jerry. I think it would be really interesting to just have a joint workshop. Maybe
I know guys who know guys.
Yeah, that might be worthwhile. Like, the LUZO committee, we should have a
I
joint
think
workshop.
that's in the works.
Is it?
Yeah, I think there is something there. We're just talking about something with the chamber. I think they're thinking about maybe taking 2 people from all the different groups in the town of Mount Desert, I believe, and having some sort of meeting, I believe Judd McGee was talking about that. I don't know how far it got, but there was talk of it.
Because some of these the committees could be working at
Mhm.
cross purposes and not even know it, or working on the same thing and not even know it.
Yeah. To me, this is a very reason why we should be diving into some comprehensive plan stuff, because at the end of the day, the comp plan should be kind of giving direction for, okay, this committee should be working on this particular issue, and you guys should be working on, you know, these issues, and this other committee should be doing that. You can start to identify that a little bit better, but since comp plans work in tandem with like the world is existing at the same time, it keeps going. And it's a really good opportunity, I think, to coordinate some efforts. So does it make sense for me to follow up with Derlin or somebody? Who's the person I should follow up with, Stephanie?
It was Jen McGee that brought it up. I think maybe she's part of on the chamber. I'm not positive. She was the one that brought it up. I think it was at the economic committee meeting. It sounded like she might have been the one sort of spearheading it. I'm not positive. But it was definitely discussed last week.
They're all town appointed committees, so that
Yep.
it should probably go through Derlin anyways. And
Yeah.
the truth is half the people are on all the committees anyways.
Yes.
I mean, it seems like I think it's a really good idea. And you'd want to have a very, like a good facilitative plan to have a productive meeting as opposed to just get everybody in the room. And so.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome. That's what I have on my list.
When are you planning on meeting again?
For this group, we'll
Yeah.
meet May.
Okay. I'm gonna be
Are we
away.
not meeting, are we not meeting in June, July, or August?
I think I mean, when I set the schedule out, Kim, I'm not going to put a hold on those dates unless everybody says we can't do it. But I think I would try to do some maybe June, July neighborhood meetings. Seems like a good idea. Maybe we see where we end up in August, but by that time, you know, things start to get a little out of it. Things get a little out of hand. I find it's hard to meet in the summer, but also helpful to meet in the summer, because by the time August or September rolls around, it's like we should be working on language for some things.
And you may find some people that are only here in the summer are interested in coming to a meeting, and
Yeah,
I'm gonna be away the first 2 weeks of June.
I think we should keep the meeting in May, and then we'll evaluate in May what we're going to do in June. But I think it's the third Wednesday in June. Oh, the other question is Bill,
Tuesday.
third Tuesday in June. Bill brought up a question today about whether or not we want to reevaluate the time and day of this meeting, and if it works for everybody, or I think he has a lot of conflicts on Tuesdays.
Well, I think, you know, me personally, hang on, I can't talk and do two things. I think the third Tuesday works for me, but because I have planning board on Wednesdays and sometimes back-to-back meetings, it's just, and then Board of Selectmen get kicked tonight because of Monday was a holiday. I know Mondays weren't good for Bill for planning board. That's why we moved him to Wednesdays. Now he's asking Tuesdays not good to have it maybe, or maybe starting earlier, but I don't know how people feel about starting these meetings earlier. People work.
Yeah, I can't start much earlier.
Yeah, and I don't think nobody wants to go on a Thursday or a Friday.
No.
Friday's out.
I mean, I feel this has worked.
Right.
I don't know what others feel.
Did
Tuesday's
Bill
been
say
good
if
for
he
me.
wanted it earlier or later? Would it
He
help
would-
Bill if it was at 6, or it just didn't matter?
I think earlier would be better for
Oh,
him.
earlier. Oh.
Yeah, and different day, but
Seems like with certain times of the year earlier might be more flexible for some people, but not during other times of the year.
Yeah, I mean, winter, that doesn't really matter to me, but spring through fall, I need my daytime.
I'm flexible. It's my job.
I mean, maybe we can consider the Wednesday. The week there's not a planning board meeting if Tuesdays don't work. I don't know. I just,
Kim, let's just stick with it for now. And then if you and I, maybe we could look at the calendar at some point. I mean, maybe we don't need to make it like a huge priority, but you know, if we want to just say, here's a couple options. If we decide we want to switch days, we'll keep it at the 5 o'clock time because that seems like a reasonable compromise between, going too late and starting too early. And then if there's another day we want to look at, it's, I feel like we penciled in this date because we found a bunch of other things that,
yeah,
There's a whole lot of other committees that
yep.
end up conflicting.
Yeah, and Zoom made it easier, but now if we're going kind of the hybrid setup, we still have to have the meeting room available, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll if it's okay with everybody, we'll keep the conversation open a little bit, but we'll just stick with the consensus seems to be, let's stick with what we have for now unless we can find a better option.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Okay,
this was published in the newspaper. Just so you know.
cool.
Oh, good job.
Kim,
Thanks. Appreciate
thank you for sending out the reminder, Kim. I was literally about ready to hit send on an email right when you did it.
Well, Jerry's the one that triggered me because he
Yep.
asked for the agenda. I'm like,
Try to-
oh. gosh.
Try to be
Send it
better
in.
at doing it ahead of time, a day or so ahead of time, but
No problem.
all right. That's it.
That's it?
All right,
All I
on to your
have.
next meetings.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.